I'm Insomniac, and this is the Q Timex Reissue Falcon Eye.
You feel the vibe.
Alright, before I get into this review, I'd like to give a big shout out to Steve. Thank you very much for lending this watch for review. The last, I think, 3 watches in a row that you've seen on this channel come up, they were all actually lent by the same guy. Pretty awesome. If anybody else would like to lend watches for review, email me at shoulditimethis@gmail.com. I'll let you know where to send them. They'll be reviewed, insured, and sent back. Okay, let's get into the watch. The case on this piece is blindingly 1970s, which is a positive or a negative depending on if you like that era of watches. The first thing that sticks out are the gold accents. The bezel and crown are both finished in a polished yellow gold color, which was a big thing in the 70s and 80s. Then you have the shape of the case. Look at it from the top and you see that you don't have lugs. Instead you have curved sides that go around the dial, but above and below the dial you have these flat brushed stainless slabs that lead down to a dead stop flat edge. The tops of the sides of the case and the sides of the case are polished, and from the side you can see a really slick visual design where the sides of the case actually dip towards the center to give the impression that the gold center of the watch is rising up out of the case, or that the sides of the case are just holding the center of the watch in place. The case back is functionally excellent and aesthetically poor at the same time, although being that this is the part of the watch that nobody sees while you're wearing it, I suppose that's not such a big deal. It's a standard brushed stainless case back, held down by 4 screws. You have some offset information about the watch lightly engraved into the lower right portion. Then you have the awesome / terrible part of the case back, the battery compartment, or the battery hatch as they call it. Obviously what's great about this is the fact that you don't have to remove the entire case back to change the battery, but visually it's this random protruding off center circle sticking out from the case back, which looks like an afterthought rather than a solid feature, which it is. It's also worth mentioning that the dimensions of this case, both in terms of diameter and height, are really nice. Definitely sweet spot dimensions on a 7-inch wrist like mine. It's not too large or bloated, yet it's not too small or lost on the wrist like some vintage style pieces, so it rides the wrist comfortably and looks proportionately nice. Overall, the machining and finishing qualities of the various case parts is pretty good for a watch in this price point, so the rest comes down to whether or not you like that 70s aesthetic. Under the acrylic crystal, which is another proper vintage throwback to watches from that era, you have what Timex calls a striated electric blue dial. The base of the dial is actually really nice. The striations are this wide wave pattern that you see here when I move the watch. It's pronounced enough to be unique, yet subtle enough that it doesn't look gaudy, and it reflects light depending on the angles, so that some parts of the dial are bright electric blue while some are deep ocean blue. It's actually very nice. At the outermost part of the dial you have small luminescent dots above each hour marker. Below those you have a clean minute track comprised of solid white lines printed on the blue dial. Then you have the hour markers, which are a mix of great and ridiculous. As you can see here, you have 11 identical applied hour markers, all of which are this cool split design. All of them are thick and tall. The issue though is the white lines on the markers. You might think that's Lume. As you'll see later in the video, it's not. They're just white lines on top of nice polished hour markers. The Q Timex and quartz text on the dial is done in gold tone applied characters, which generally match the faint gold tone hands and hour indices. The hour and minute hands on this watch are very nice because they match the indices with their split design, and their length is right for this dial, with the minute hand and second hand reaching well out into the minute track. The second hand is a tapered stick type hand coated in white, which contrasts great with the blue dial and matches the other white accents on the dial very well. Lastly, we have the day and date windows at 3 o'clock. Black printing on a white disc, large and easy to read, and displayed behind these nicely angled gold borders. Overall, it's a really nice dial, minus the unnecessary not Lume white coloring on the otherwise nice hour markers. There are 2 usable complications on the Q Timex, day and date, and don't worry, they're not usually sloppy and misaligned like that. It's actually 12:42, almost 12:43 a.m. that I'm recording this, so the day of the week hasn't actually flipped over yet, but it's on its way. and the date 31st is actually on its way in, so that's not completely aligned yet. So anyway, kind of ignore that. That's my fault, not the watch. As discussed in the previous section, they're neatly placed, large, easy to read, and obviously the date and day of the week are two very useful pieces of information to have available at a glance, so good stuff. Lume on this watch is pretty poor. As I mentioned earlier, all that white on the hour indices is not Lume, and because this is a reissue of a 70's Timex, there's no cool Timex Indiglo like on a lot of their other watches. I don't think Indiglo came along till later on, but correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. Instead, you have Lume filling in the hour and minute hands, and the tiny dots above each hour marker. Not only are they small areas, but they don't pick up a decent charge with a standard indoor light. What you see here is the Lume purposely charged with a high-intensity light source, and even still it's not all that great. So the Lume situation on this piece really isn't a strong point. Time at a glance on this watch is excellent. Because of the depth of the blue dial under white accents on all of the markers and hands, mixed with the perfect length of the hands and precise ends, it's really easy to tell the time on this watch quickly. Accuracy on this piece is literally the same story that you've heard me tell with the last countless number of quartz watches on this channel. If this is your first time watching one of my reviews, here's the simple story for the 100th time. It's a simple quartz movement. It has been perfectly accurate for the week plus that I wore the watch, but it loses a couple of points for the look of the movement. As is typical with most deadbeat second hands on quartz watches, there's a cheap springiness to the stop of the hand through some of the parts of the dial, and the second hand rarely stops on any of the minute indices. So is it accurate? Definitely. But it looks sloppy. Timex used what they call a period-correct woven stainless steel strap on this watch, which does work well with the case aesthetically, but the strap might literally be my least favorite part of this watch. The only positive I could really point out about this bracelet besides the period-correct aesthetic is the fact that these woven-style bracelets have more multi-directional flex to them than most other kinds of steel bracelets. Otherwise, it's a poor system. First of all, and probably least important, is the feel of the bracelet in terms of balance. Believe it or not, for a quartz watch, the body of the Q Timex really has some solid heft to it. The bracelet is so thin and light that the body of the watch does feel slightly top-heavy on the wrist. Next, you have the size adjuster. It's a serious pain in the ass. You'd think that a slider would be a lot more convenient than having to take out pins, but you need a screwdriver to pry up the adjuster. Then in order to figure out where to re-snap the slider, you honestly need 3 hands. One to hold the watch body, another to hold the strap around your wrist, and a third to slide the adjuster to approximately where you think it'll fit correctly. It actually took me 3 tries to get the sizing right. Once I got the size right, I still didn't like the functionality of it because the clasp mechanism is ridiculous. It uses a hook and a snap. You hook this bottom part over this bar. See if I could get it there on camera. So you hook the bottom part over the bar there, then you push the Timex engraved clasp down to lock it in place. And as if that isn't enough, all of the excess woven style steel strap that's left winds up under the other side of the bracelet, which isn't necessarily uncomfortable, but it doesn't stay in place perfectly behind the outer layer of strap. So throughout the day you often see that excess steel poking out from under the other layer of steel, which kinda looks ridiculous. Long story short, once you get it adjusted, it's a fairly comfortable strap, and it does look the part with this watch, but if it were my watch, it would be the first thing to go in favor of some other kind of strap or bracelet. As of the time of this review, Timex is selling this particular model for $179. Really, what's going to dictate the overall value here is your aesthetic preferences. Is it well built? Yes. Is it accurate and have a couple of usable complications? Yes. But can you find other quartz watches with similar build quality for less money? Also yes. So where the value comes in here is with that vintage aesthetic and with that cool striated dial, which really is well executed on this watch. If you love the look of this piece, I'd say it's well worth the money. The only thing that it loses an extra point for is the bracelet. If it were just that I don't like it, I would never subtract any points for that, but I honestly think it's just pretty bad. Like I said, it looks great, but it's really annoying. So again, a big thanks to Steve for sending this in. As much as I don't like the strap, I actually like the watch overall. I think this is very nice, pretty cool. This is a recent reissue put out by Timex, so it was nice to have one of these come in so I could check it out for myself. If you have one of these, definitely leave a comment down below. Make sure you like the video, subscribe. I have a lot more watch videos coming up soon. And that's it. I'll see you all at the next one.